Yes, we are live. Hello, everyone. Super excited to be here and welcome to another episode of What is School For? I'm really excited to restart my live streaming show again because I took a pause. I definitely need to learn from Sheng in terms of how to stay consistent. And so anyway, for those of you who don't know me, my name is AI. I'm the CEO of Classroom Without Walls and the host of this weekly live streaming show. And as I mentioned earlier, I took a pause hosting my own show, but recently I had the great honor to be a part of this LinkedIn Creator Accelerator program.
Yeah.
Yes, where I connected with Sean. So we're both like winners of this program. And
Yes.
the minute or the second I connected with him, I was like, oh my God, this guy is absolutely amazing. And so I said, I have to get him on my live show. And here we are and talking about his journey from Berkeley, right,
Yeah.
to Google to become a full-time content creator and
Mhm.
entrepreneur doing what he loves. I think it's like so amazing and reminds me so much of my own self-reinvention
Oh, yeah.
journey. So really excited to have today's conversation. And so without any further ado, Sean, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, I. I mean, it's such an honor to be here. Dr. I is on such an amazing mission, transforming education for youth. Having gone through like the formal education system myself, I'm like, wow, this is quite transformational. I really
Thank you.
appreciate being on here.
Thank you. I can say the same thing about you. And I forgot to
Mhm.
mention, so after Sean embarked on this
Mhm.
self-reinvention journey, so right now you are mainly you are the founder at
Yes.
Mind Map Nation.
Yes.
And I have been watching actually quite a few of your YouTube videos.
Mhm.
And my personal favorite one is the same as yours, which is you're talking about emotion, how to really
Yes.
handle our emotion. Really, really love that. And
Thank you.
Sean
Yeah.
also serves as an AI startup strategist, and he's a
Mhm.
full-time YouTuber and writer,
Yeah.
and used to work at Google and Deloitte and pretty much all the well-known companies, I feel like.
Mhm.
So overall, he is, which I love, you mentioned this on your LinkedIn, an organizer of chaos.
Yes.
I love that. I love that. Yeah. So I'm like, maybe you can also say a few words about yourself. I'm sure my introduction is really, really short compared to
Oh
what
yeah,
you
for sure,
actually do.
definitely. No, I think Dr. I, you covered so much of of what I do already. I would say that these days what I do is really helping people live intentional lives, right?
Mm,
And what I mean by that is really understanding why we do things,
mm,
because in today's world of like being productive and cranking out a lot of output and results, we sometimes actually just almost become machines, right? That we're programming to be automated and everything. However, the most important thing is actually understanding what is the reason behind that we actually do stuff, right?
mm,
So mind mapping is actually one way to get there. And it's
mm,
because what chaos does in our lives is that once you get into, the grind, or you're being bombarded with all this noise and obligations, is that you're just prone to just automatically do things.
mm.
You don't really think about the why because you can't, right?
That's right.
So by helping people organize their lives, let's say using mind mapping, using frameworks and all this, it gives us an opportunity to start considering what is the music of our lives, not just the noise, right?
Mm.
So basically that's my mission these days.
I love it. I love it. It is actually like almost like art, so artistic. I actually saw
Mhm.
quite a few of your mind maps. I'm like, wow, it looks so elegant. It is chaotic, but
Mhm.
at the same time, I
Yeah.
can see the beauty organization through chaos. So that's really amazing. We're definitely going to talk more about that. But
Mhm.
before we dive into what you are doing nowadays, I would
Yeah.
love to travel back to history.
Yeah.
So you mentioned on your LinkedIn that you are an immigrant from Shanghai. I'm also
Yeah.
an immigrant from Beijing as
Wow.
well. Yeah, so I'm curious what inspired you, I guess, your parents to come to the
Yes.
US.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I am privileged actually to have my parents, take on all of the hard work as immigrants coming from
Mm,
Shanghai to the Bay Area. Actually, I'm a Bay Area grown kid. I grew up in Milpitas. I went to school in Berkeley. I worked in Mountain
mm,
View in San Francisco, San Jose, before, going across the ocean to London for my MBA, right? So for the most part, I have so much that I owe to my parents for the most
mm,
part. I would say that, coming over to the United States at 7 years old, it was a bit of
Wow.
a culture shock, right? I didn't know a word of English. I knew like apple or something like that, right? But kids learn so quickly. That's the thing. That's the immersiveness of it as well.
Mm,
There's something beautiful about the fact that kids don't have this filter sometimes, when
that's
you
right.
put like a third grader or a second grader into grade school, they pick up the language so quickly. That
Yes.
neuroplasticity is
Yes.
there. But not just that, it's also because you're not as embarrassed to try new things, right? These are kind of a lot of the social constructs that get implemented in us as we become adults through life.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That is amazing. I love that. I didn't come to the US until in my early 20s. So that's
Ah,
amazing.
yeah,
I can definitely, and when I look at my own kids, when I look at other kids and how they can quickly adapt to a different
yeah.
culture, so that is really amazing. So after, as you mentioned, you went to Berkeley and London, and I think it is London Business School for your master
Mm.
degree. So can you please share with me and with our audience, how has the role of how
Mm.
has your education experience really prepared you and now to prepared you for your success?
Yeah. It's interesting. I think about this quite often, right? Mainly because as I'm on this like, solo creator journey and everything, I get asked that a lot because I think formal education, I don't really remember much of what I actually learned in the classroom, but it's actually the
Join the
foundation.
club. Join the club.
What I'm realizing is that, it's the challenge of going through the process. Actually,
Mm,
it's kind of like mind mapping. Sometimes I tell people, my students and my YouTube audience, that it's not about necessarily, the end output. It's
mm,
actually about the process of mapping, of expanding out your thoughts, of going down rabbit holes, of
mm,
going off of your curiosity and following that, as well as, it's like karate or taekwondo and stuff, right? It's like getting to the next level that builds character as well as a foundation for learning.
mm,
So I would say that the formal education has, multiple benefits for me at least. The first one is what I alluded to, basically the process. The second one is societal signaling. Essentially, if you go to Berkeley, let's say, and you go through, let's say London Business School, etc., it sends a signal essentially to the job market, right?
mm,
That you have gone through this process, or you have, reached this level of intellectual rigor of sorts. So that makes things a lot easier. However, I will also say that what I learned in school is also very important. So
mm,
I got dual degrees in legal studies and business administration at Berkeley, right?
mm,
And I would say the legal studies was actually much more useful in the long run than just the
mm.
business. I would say the business degree in the short term actually is what got me the jobs back in 2010, because we were going through like the financial crisis and the recession and stuff like that. So I needed every advantage I could get in the job market. It was a really tough time. Um, However, now 10 years after graduation, 12 years after graduation, I think that legal studies, because it was a philosophy major, actually, it
Mm,
wasn't the study of law itself. It was actually the study of why law exists, right?
mm,
And because of that, it gave me a lot of this philosophical and rhetoric type of grounding, or
mm.
fundamental understanding of concepts like, oh, like utilitarianism, or whatever it
Wow.
is, right? So these are very abstract terms that you can start defining the world with. But these are like first, it's like it's related to first principle thinking. I think what legal
Mm,
studies helped me with was actually give me an understanding of these base principles that then you can take and build your own, constructs and models of the world, right? And that's much more valuable than just learning, let's say, accounting or the latest marketing tactics.
mm,
The way that I think about learning is that, there's actually a spectrum there. It goes from, let's say, theory or frameworks, and then
mm,
it goes down to strategies and tactics downstream, right?
mm,
However, once you learn the foundational principles, you're able to come to your own conclusions on the tactical side.
mm.
So business was very tactical,
Yeah.
whereas legal studies was very more theoretical. But I think in the long run, having that first principle thinking training is very, very helpful.
Wow. That is so interesting. Just listening to what you said really reminds me of the power of a liberal arts education. You really have that lots
Absolutely.
of training. Reminds me of the courses, deontology, utilitarianism, consequentialism, that all those
Exactly.
things that I learned.
Yes.
But yeah, I actually last night my husband and I we had this very heated debate
Really?
regarding the value of a liberal arts education. Should students even
Oh
learn
man.
history? What's the
Yeah.
value? So
Oh,
it's really, really interesting to hear what you just mentioned. So from this really impressive educational background, you went to like Google, Deloitte, like a number of really impressive companies.
yeah.
And so I'm curious, what triggered you or what inspired you to say goodbye, to leave everything behind, to
Hmm.
start this almost like on a completely different path, right? Like from working for
Yeah.
someone else, becoming your own boss, like like solopreneur, content creator.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
how did you make that reinvention?
Oh man, that's such a loaded question. I almost feel like I need to draw a mind map to expand out all the different elements behind that, you know? Actually, in fact, I did draw a mini mind map, to try to organize my thoughts. Um,
I
but
love
man,
that.
I would say, it's definitely a process, right?
Mm,
It didn't happen overnight because, back in college, what I wanted to do was to actually be a management consultant,
mm,
to, go into McKinsey, Bain, or BCG and literally lead organizations through corporate warfare. That was like the kind of mentality I had back in college, 12 years ago. And man, things have changed so much since then. I
mm,
would say I went into the job force with Deloitte on enterprise risk consulting, and within a year, I realized that that wasn't really for me. I really wanted to actually be part of a team to actually
mm,
build something, rather than being a consultant or an advisor to a company necessarily. And I also saw like what my managers, senior managers, and partners did at the company at Deloitte, and I was like, that's not necessarily something that I really want to do, right?
mm.
So I ended up jumping into my first startup actually right after Deloitte, a year afterwards, and it was a solar startup.
Wow.
However, that was the shortest stint that I've ever did at a startup because, gosh, it was 2011, and I remember this was when solar really took a dip, right? This was when it was like the first round of renewables, clean tech market going, and I was essentially laid off, right?
Oh,
And I
wow.
didn't even see the writing was on the wall, and I didn't even see it. Like, for example, the CMO left, the CFO left, the
Mm,
COO left. We got a replacement. And at the time, when a year out of college, I was so naive, right? I didn't
mm,
expect to be laid off.
mm,
So 6 months afterwards, my boss was like, "Hey, Shane, I got to talk to you in the office." And then she was like, "Hey, you know what? The company's going through a really tough time, and I'm sorry, but this is what it is. You got to grab your stuff. You got to head out." So I
mm.
remember just like, grabbing my stuff in it, literally like a box. It's like, exactly what you would picture, right?
Unlike the movies, yeah.
Yeah, in the movies, exactly. And I'm doing this like slow walk, into the car. And I just sat in my car for like 15 minutes going, wow, I can't believe that just happened, right? I couldn't even tell my parents at the time because, Asian parents, it's just like shameful.
Shame.
Yeah, exactly. No. And I remember, I actually had just gotten my apartment at that point. I just bought actually a condo. So I actually had a mortgage going on too.
Wow.
Plus I got laid off, and we were still going through the aftermath of the 28 recession, right?
Yeah.
So I didn't know this at the time, but it took me 8 months to actually, and almost 100 job applications to actually land my next job, which was actually on the
Wow.
strategy team at Google, right? But during those 8 months, I wasn't idle. I was super on top of like applying to all these jobs. And it got super discouraging at some points. It was literally like, okay, at some point I just felt like crying, but I was like, I'm not gonna complain until I hit triple digits on this spreadsheet that was tracking all my progress from application, round one interviews, round two interviews, final interviews, right? And even Google, for everybody who actually has ever applied to Google, it's a freaking black box, right?
Mm,
you submit all your application stuff, you go through the rounds of interview, and you don't exactly know when you're going to actually hear back from them. And in fact, I was actually so close to getting my first position within Google, and then the team actually reorged. And this is very, very common within all the technology companies, that they reorg like crazy. So the team that I was applying for didn't even exist anymore, right? And it was super disheartening, because the recruiter came back to me and said, I'm really sorry. Everybody really liked doing stuff, but literally the team is no longer there. So you're going to have to start from scratch. But the silver lining is that we have a lot of data on you. Data, like basically it's like Google runs on data. And she was like, we can pass your portfolio, your profile to other teams that might be interested. So I had no choice but start from scratch again, right? But then I went through another 6 rounds of interviews, but this was actually with my dream team. This was actually with the strategy team within Google's local incubator. Basically, it's an accelerator like LinkedIn, but for our local products. So our team actually launched like the first version of Google Wallet, Google Offers, and all this, right? So it's actually a really exciting opportunity. But it actually took like multiple failures and a lot of persistence and trying to keep your mood and your mentality up through that journey in order to get there. So I don't know if that answers some of the questions, but it's a whole journey, but that actually built up a lot of resilience, right? Because imagine this, like in the beginning, so this, I'll get to how I became a creator and why I pulled that trigger, which is, coming out of college and getting laid off, and then you land your dream job. You actually have like the worst case scenario happen to you right out the gate. And from that learning, I was like, wow, this is the worst thing that can happen to me professionally. And this happened within like the first 1.5 years. It built a lot of almost like a survival kind of like, bias thing. It's like, hey, I can live through this. And that means I can live through anything really on the professional side. And since then, I've actually jumped around quite a bit. If you go on my LinkedIn, you'll see that I worked for 7 different companies.
I saw it.
Apart, right? Yeah. And every single one of them is a different role, actually. I've been a product manager. I've been a designer. I've been a business strategist, business developer, a short stint as a venture capitalist. So I've done pretty much everything except for engineering. And, and that's the kind of thing, which is your ability to change yourself or reinvent yourself is like a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger and the more comfortable you are with, going to change, right? So I think by the time that it got to this question of, hey, do I want to leave, the technology industry and go into education, basically as a creator, as a solopreneur, that was a relatively easy choice for me to make, at least on the emotional level. I had taken so many risks before in my life.
I absolutely love this story. I didn't know about the being laid off. I think that's amazing. I think it's very hard from as an outsider when we look at your resume. It is so impressive. It is almost unbelievable to hear that you also went through this process. I don't know, Sean, if you follow the news recently. So New York University, there's a professor got laid off. And so when I heard the professor got laid off, being fired because his class was being too hard, or complained by the students. And so what I'm hearing from your story is a very high level of resilience. So how did you build and cultivate that level of resilience that, like, after this really impressive background, you got laid off in the very first year, the worst case scenario, but you still decided to not give up, to keep going? I think I don't see that in many young people today. So what is it that really helped you build the resilience muscle, that you're not afraid of failures, you're not afraid of risk, you're not afraid of even being laid off? I think what you experience can easily destroy many of the students that I work with. So if you can share some tips, I think that would be great.
Definitely, yeah. And I did see that actually through your post and through your video. Actually, I thought that was a really good commentary. In fact, I was like, wow, times have changed quite a bit, right? And ultimately, I think it really depends on, what the part. I'll answer in different ways, actually. I would say for me, resilience came from the fact that during school, actually, even during Berkeley times,
Mm.
edu- uh, my grades were actually not that great, you know, and it's because I focused so much on extracurricular
I
activities,
love it.
right? So I actually took on so many different leadership positions, like leading consulting projects and stuff like that. If anybody who goes to UC Berkeley undergrad, they will have heard of the organization called Berkeley Consulting. It's
Mm.
basically the preeminent consulting club on campus, and they only select 5 undergrad students from 200 applicants every semester,
Wow.
right? So I got in during my junior year, and I ran different consulting projects for Fortune 500 companies as an undergrad. And
Wow.
then I also started my own, consulting branch within another club, and I was club president for multiple years. So from a very early age, my emphasis was actually on leading people as well, not just leading people, but actually you know, making real impact outside of just grades.
Mm.
And it's because of my curiosity, and the fact that I actually found the classroom, for lack of a better word, it was a little bit boring. I actually like interacting with people and
Mm.
solving problems, real problems,
Mm.
right? So I think these opportunities give me a lot of almost like grit to go through it,
Mm.
because it's one thing to actually just cram for an exam, another thing where you feel like, oh my gosh, that client call really went bad, how do I salvage this project from here on, right?
Mm.
It's a very different life experience. So by the time that when I got into the workforce, I already had a professional mindset. I already had this foundation going in. And not only that, during those 8 months that I was laid off, I wasn't just applying to jobs. If that were the sole focus and the only game I played, I think I would have been completely burnt out.
Mm.
I actually started a startup with one of my friends from undergrad, from Berkeley, right? This was like the sharing economy before the sharing economy even existed.
Mm.
Basically had this like whole business model and system going on about how can you leverage people to deliver things for you, on their way to their job or whatever it is, commuters. So I learned design through that. I learned creating a pitch deck, right? I learned
Mm.
how to work with engineers, because we actually got a co-founder, a CTO through that. So that was literally the first 5 months of being laid off, just starting a company, right? So that was a learning process. That was literally how I learned product design. So I would say resilience comes from necessity, and necessity comes from the opportunities that you put yourself in. I would
Mm.
say that I am driven, but I'm not. I'm motivated, but I'm not. I don't have like the self-discipline like a lot of my friends do. So what I understand about myself is that I have to put myself in really difficult positions, like, oh, I got to sign
Mm.
up for a project or be
Mm.
part of like LinkedIn accelerator program. But then once I'm in, it's like a sink or swim. It's like, okay, I gotta survive now, right?
That's
It's
right.
these situations that really teach you resilience at a real life level.
Mm. Mm. I just love everything you mentioned. I think it seems to me that you gain so much more from the real life experiences, like doing all those
Yes.
things, than the classes that you are taking. I feel that many students nowadays, they do the opposite.
Yes.
They spend so much time doing their schoolwork that everything else is like, oh yeah, they don't matter. So I think
Yeah.
your story also reminds me of a book. I don't know if you know. It is titled uh, "Why A Students Work for C Students and B
Oh.
Students Work for the Government." I can literally share my story.
I,
It's
I
not,
gotta I gotta get that recommendation from you. That sounds like a fascinating book.
yeah, yeah. It is the same author who wrote Rich Dad and
Hmm.
Poor Dad. So I have this actually showed the book to my students
Oh, very cool.
earlier. So why A students work for C student? I
Ah,
don't know if you're a C student, but it seems that you are not an A student. So I think this theory is proven, at least in your case. So it's a really,
yes.
really, really fun book. Yeah. So please do share with us. So how did you? This is really impressive. So
Mhm.
how did you start like this content creation journey? And I
Yeah.
watched some of you, quite a few of your YouTube videos.
Mhm.
I'm going to share the link. I see we have a few people on LinkedIn. We have quite a few people on Amazon Live. So let us know
Oh,
where you
cool.
guys are joining us live from Amazon. And so I'm going to share the link in the comment section where people can check out your
Mhm.
viral YouTube video and
Yeah.
also your personal favorite one. I think they are definitely amazing. So how did you get
Mm.
started with this content creation journey? Did you start after you left your job, or you were doing this as a side hustle?
Oh man, well, first of all, I never expected to be on this creator path at all. Like if you
Oh,
asked me 3
wow.
years ago, how I oh, sorry. Give me 1 second. If you asked me like 3 years ago whether or not I would have become a YouTuber, it's unbelievable. I would not
Mm,
have said yes at all, not even in my wildest dreams, right? But I think a few things happened in the last couple of years. For example, the pandemic, right? That was a
mhm.
huge part of it. And if you look on my YouTube channel, my very first video that I had posted, on my channel was actually March of 2020.
It's like 5 years ago.
Yeah, actually, well, three years ago. It's literally the month that the pandemic happened.
Oh, wow.
So it was kind of crazy because, my whole thing has been about bringing order to chaos, right?
Mm,
And then here it was, this event, this once in a lifetime event that brought ultimate chaos into our lives. Like literally, we were all stuck at home in quarantine. The economy, the entire national economies were now put on ice, right?
mm,
People were really frightened. And I saw real suffering from like people I knew from the amount of uncertainty and confusion that was going on. Because again, March 2020, we didn't know what COVID was,
mm,
right? What is the pandemic? So here I was with a tool like mind mapping and framework thinking, systems thinking, that actually brought a lot of sense and order in my own life.
mm.
That I decided to turn my photography camera, around, and film a series of tutorials around this tool called mind mapping. So long story short, a couple of my videos went viral because I
Mm,
think a lot of people were searching for certainty at that time as well. Also, we were spending a lot of time on everybody was stuck at home on YouTube and stuff like that.
mm,
So it showed me that there was value to be had, that there was something worth sharing for me, right? And at the time, I was definitely still working for the startup, and I was in a business
mm.
development role. And I was before the pandemic, I traveled everywhere. I was sent to Korea, Japan, Dubai, London, everywhere to close
Wow.
businesses. So suddenly, we were all grounded, and I had so much extra time. So that
Mm,
actually contributed to my ability to actually create content as well, plus the need. So long story short, it was like 2 years after creating, or 1.5 years after creating content, that I decided that it felt like my day job was starting to become a distraction to what I
mm,
really wanted to do,
mm.
right? And I think on our very first LinkedIn kickoff call, Cole and Samir said that your audience will tell you when it's time to go in full time. So for me, it was like, oh, a couple 100,000 views essentially on a few of my videos. That was like, okay, that is both the indication plus the feeling to go in full time.
Mm. I love it. Did you have any fear? Because I know when I
Yeah,
quit my full-time job, I was like, oh my God, there's no more paychecks. Like, what's going to
I
happen?
know.
So, how did you navigate through that fear?
Yeah, well, it's still an ongoing thing, like even
Mm,
this March, I would say, when the markets went down, right? When my portfolio went down and everything, and this was like a year after I had quit my job from the corporate world, the cash was starting to become tight, and I was starting
mm,
to think about, hey, should I go back into the workforce to support myself, to support my now wife as well, right?
oh,
So, so many of things go through my head, and it doesn't get easier. You
mm,
just get better essentially at dealing with it. I
mm,
would say I definitely had that fear, right?
mm,
And especially because coming from like a Asian background where my parents judged the crap out of me, even today, like they're only starting now to ease up, go like, oh, you're getting some more traction. Oh, you're getting clients. Oh,
mm,
you're got into this accelerator and all this, right? So there's validation now. But when I first started, like we butt heads like crazy.
mm,
This is the interesting thing, which is, you know, maybe it is for a lot of people, but I feel like especially in the Asian American community, there's a lot of judgment when you steer off the beaten path, right? If you're not on the stable path of engineering, doctor, lawyer, whatever it is, the surefire way to make a salary, not only will your parents judge you, but everybody around you will judge you. So there's almost like a silent pull. It's hard enough in the corporate world to break past a certain ceiling in your trajectory, but then there's also this like invisible pull from the people closest to you, actually pulling you back from what you really want to do in Trailblaze. So I had to deal with not only my own fear, but also the judgment of a lot of the people closest to me as well.
Yeah. Oh my God. Actually, earlier this year, I did my TEDx talk. That's my opening
Mm.
line. Doctor, failure, doctor, lawyer, or failure. That was my career path. So I
Oh my
became
gosh.
an academic doctor and I got my PhD. But is that really what I wanted? Absolutely not. So I definitely hear you. But it's nice that your parents are slowly kind of they're endorsing you for this new path. Is that right?
Yes. I wouldn't say endorsing yet. Maybe give me another year or so. Maybe I'll change their mind. It's a work in progress.
Wow. So what do you think? It seems like you're also doing clients work. I think with me being like, I don't even think I'm a full-time content creator. I'm not even very consistent. I think with this LinkedIn Accelerator program, it really helps me to stay consistent. But I see myself more as a business person running my business. But
Yeah.
how do you balance between, working with clients, balancing your own business,
Yeah.
and as a full-time content creator, especially your videos? I mean, like I was actually
Yes.
I have done hundreds of interviews, Seth Godin, those people. But
Man.
today I was like, oh my God, he's
Yeah.
so good, like so professional. I was really, really nervous. Like your videos are so high quality. So like share
Yes.
with us, how do you stay consistent and at the same time just
Yeah.
keep your business running?
Oh my gosh. There's a couple ways to answer this. I think, at the end of the day, it's about creating a system for yourself, right? If I looked at each piece of content that I produce as just a one piece, I will be very quickly overwhelmed,
Mhm.
essentially. So, I see my life almost as a system where, for example, there is YouTube, and then there is my client work, my workshops, and all that, right? It's actually all connected. They're not
Mhm.
separate. That's the key thing.
Mhm.
And it's good that they're connected because, for example, when I put things out on YouTube, right? People find me on there. They'll reach me out. They'll reach out to me for workshop stuff, for client
Mhm.
stuff, for coaching. And then one of my favorite philosophers, actually, Seneca, um, basically had a saying, which is people learn as they teach.
Mhm.
I heavily subscribe to that, where it becomes a virtuous cycle where I learn from my client work as well. Every time when we do talks or we run workshops, we're forced to crystallize and clarify our learnings as well. So a lot of the things that I learn from my client work, I actually then scale that using video or articles, etc. Right? So you create a feedback loop that's virtuous. That's the first step. The second step then is to create a system or a procedure and tools in order to
Mhm.
operationalize things.
Mhm.
So for me, I'm a big user of both My Maps as well as Notion, right?
Mhm.
So for those who are not familiar with Notion, it's, how do I describe it? It's like a note-taking, Kanban board, productivity app, wiki, all in one. So I started using Notion in my in my last job as in the startup, right? And I had recommended to my CTO because I had already created these business dashboards for my company through Notion to track our progress, our deals, our leads, and different stages. I even use it as a CRM. So transitioning that into my content creation business now, it's interesting even calling it business, right? Because
Mhm.
that's actually how you have to treat it. I now have like a Kanban board essentially for all four of my areas of focus. So that's LinkedIn as of 2 weeks ago,
Mhm.
YouTube, My Map Nation, as well as my newsletter. Those are like the four major focus areas. And then the Kanban board, this is actually a concept that's actually taken from Toyota. Toyota actually invented this, and all it is essentially is a board, like a Trello board, with different stages of
Mhm.
completion, from idea to writing to editing, or to filming, editing, publishing, distribution, done, right?
Mhm.
So I move and you basically create these cards for every video, for every newsletter, for every project, and then you basically write out the different components of it, all the content in those cards, and then move it across, right? So this is how I track my progress across all 4 of these focus areas. And I think as of last year, the other game changer has been to actually start delegating and outsourcing. This is really critical. And this is, moving in corporate speak, transitioning or growing from an individual contributor or IC to a manager. And that's a critical part, because at some point of your growth, you are going to become the bottleneck.
Yeah.
The only way to bust out of that bottleneck is either make yourself more efficient through systems or to outsource certain tasks. So I hired an editor for, a lot of my videos.
Oh, wow.
I learned editing from scratch and everything. I used to spend 15 hours, on each video and stuff like that. And at some point became really unsustainable. So now my editor saves me on average, like 10 hours per video, which is huge, right? That frees me up to do the things that are like, that I enjoy, and also the value add too, which is the ideation, the talking to clients, to learning, right? Rather than just the editing, because that's ultimately not my core value add.
I love that. And I think it's like delegation. I love what Lance mentioned here, like processes, procedures, systems. They are very, very important. I think that is something that as a content creator or even as a business, I'm slowly learning to trust other people to do this, knowing that I don't have to be hands-on everything. Other people can probably do a better job than myself. Yeah.
Totally. Well, the other thing, Dr. I, is that you do super well, which is, rather than being just like, super polished and editing everything, just putting things out there, right? Like this is actually what I'm really getting out of the LinkedIn Accelerator, which is, it's also out of necessity. It's literally
I was about to say exactly the same thing, out of necessity. Yes.
out of necessity, right? Because we're now cranking out stuff at such a rapid rate. Like it's impossible to actually be super polished and spend 10 hours per video. Neither does that even work on this platform. So now I'm actually taking advantage. Again, I love external things making me do things, right? So this is actually an opportunity now I'm taking advantage of to be more just like spontaneous. Like jumping on even, a podcast like this, right? It's completely unscripted. We're just chatting and we're learning a lot, right? And we're sharing our learnings of other people without this buffer or this polish, step.
Yeah.
So that's been really magical as well.
Yeah, I mean, I'm just listening to you talk. I already wrote down ideas for at least 2 short LinkedIn videos because you really inspire me. I'm like, wow, I would love to ask that question to my audience. So thank you. Yeah, definitely. I definitely hear that. And so do you see yourself as a kind of a long-term content creator? I remember someone in the audience asked Brian, I forgot his last name. I think he was asking, because you have this really impressed from Berkeley, Google, Deloitte, very impressive background. Do you think this is a prerequisite for other people to dive into content creation, become a creator, or even on bigger level, are there certain prerequisites that people have to check boxes so that they can declare, I'm becoming a content creator, tapping into this creator economy?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. And actually, Brian's one of my good friends. He's a director of business development at one of the big tech companies. So he knows me pretty well, and he knows exactly my background and stuff like that. But I think that's a really good question because I do have a good background with Google, Berkeley, LBS, all this stuff like that. However, at the same time, I would say that shouldn't be a prerequisite at all for creating. The beauty of today's world, there's actually 2 things, 2 trends that's going to drive what I say next. The first one is the democratization of creation tools, right? It is easier than ever to create. So the creation process, actually creativity itself, as Steve Jobs actually famously said that, creativity is just connecting things. Right? It's just synthesizing things. There's no, I believe in this, this concept that there is no such thing as a truly original thing. Like everything that we talk about, that we come up with is built upon the body of knowledge of all humans that came before us and around us, right? We're all influenced by, in some respect. So in a lot of ways, these days, the creation process is actually pulling together the things that have happened to you, the things that, other people have said. But not only that, it's like, the creation tools are super easy these days. You can literally just pick up a phone camera and start filming, right? There are stock images, there are stock videos, stock, music everywhere for cheap these days. And all these things come together to make every single part of or piece of the content that I create. So democratization of tools is the first part. The second one is permissionless platforms like YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, whatever it is. The key word is permissionless, because you don't need gatekeepers. It's not like you're publishing on MSN or ABC or any of the broadcasting, right? The channels themselves have actually been democratized as well. Like nothing stopped me from just posting a video on LinkedIn or YouTube to start off with, right? And then the thing is, the important thing is actually to start creating and to start actually sharing your personal knowledge. And this actually brings me to the third point, which is two things. The first one is Peter Thiel said that competition is for losers, right? And he actually said this in the way that people tend to, especially in kind of the formal education as well as the work environment, where whenever we as humans, we see competition as almost like a signal to go more towards something, right? If everybody wants this, oh, it must be great. If the price is high, we must go for it. That's how bubbles happen, right? So his whole thing is that competition is for losers, meaning that you should look for areas in which there's not a lot of competition, in which you can actually become a monopoly, right? The goal of every business is actually to become a monopoly. And then combine that with what Naval Ravikant, the founder of AngelList, he basically said that every one of us is very unique. Therefore, you want to look for your personal strengths. What is your superpower, right? What is something that you do better than anybody else that you know around you? But not only that, it's work for everybody else, but it's actually play for you, right? This is how you're able to dig out your own niche, and there is no competition. Again, this is how you win. So in this sense, I discover very quickly that mind mapping is my niche. I do mind mapping better than anybody else. It is literally play for me. I go down conversation routes, and I'm just like, my mind is just always organizing. In a conversation, I think in terms of mind maps. That's the crazy part, right? What is so taxing for a lot of my clients, a lot of my friends, is play for me. So it's about finding what that superpower is, and then figuring out what that niche, right? And then really diving into it through permissionless platforms and leveraging these creation tools that are now democratized and becoming cheaper and cheaper.
I absolutely love those 3 points. They're so powerful. Especially, I resonated a lot with the last points. And I think that reminds me of the red ocean versus blue ocean. So many people are trying to compete in the red ocean. They're like, yeah, there's actually entire blue ocean that they miss. And I think, going back to education, I think that's the biggest challenge facing my students today.
Yes.
I'm not sure about you, Sean, but when I was a student, I was trying so hard to fit in. I'm like, how can I be even more similar?
Yeah.
But that's now going to really help them succeed in the future. Is that right?
I mean, this goes back to what we were talking about, liberal arts versus the current education system, right? Like, it's interesting because the way that I see Berkeley these days is that, it used to be more of a liberal arts kind of, college when it first started. I feel like every college when it first started is almost kind of like liberal arts, right? That was the point of college to begin with. However, over the last 10 years, I see Berkeley becoming more of almost kind of like a feeder school into tech companies, just because of its proximity to Silicon Valley. Same thing with Stanford, actually, in a lot of sense, which is, the industry is so hot these days in tech with, Meta, Google, LinkedIn, all these other companies, is that, now the schools are now just cranking out almost, no offense, but almost like cookie cutter engineers, strategists, product managers, to fit a particular role that feeds into these companies. Right. And it's a very purpose-driven thing rather than, asking students to actually explore what their own strengths are. You're now asked, or not just asked, but you're trained and forced through a funnel to fit a particular role. So in that sense, you graduate from college without really truly knowing what are your actual core strengths. You just know that you do really well on tests. You're really good at math. You're really good at coding. Right. And then you're forced to find that out much later in life, which I believe is quite unfortunate because you're now going straight into the red ocean, in your words.
Yeah, I love that. And that's exactly what's happening to many students today. Even after 4-year college, they chose a major because my school is really famous for accounting, or my school is really famous for technology. They chose that major, but it's actually not capitalizing on their strength. Maybe they're even playing to their weaknesses. And
Yes.
so as a result, they suffer, they got laid off, and they come kind of restart the entire 4-year cycle to discover
Right.
who am I? What do I really need to do?
Right.
Then it is a waste of like really 4 years in college and money. Yeah, as we talk about young people. And so I I feel like creator economy is already
Mm,
quite popular. But in my day-to-day life
mm,
working with the students, I haven't really run into any college age student who will say, I want to
mm.
become a full-time content creator.
Yes.
I don't know if it's because of their parents or what. So I'm curious, have you ever observed or interacted with young people who want to become creator, who want to tap into the creator economy? If there are
Mhm.
kids who are kind of afraid of this, thinking about this, what advice do you have for those
Ah.
people who are thinking about, my parents are
Mhm.
definitely not going to approve if I tell them my career is going to be a YouTuber. Even career center, right?
Yeah.
Many colleges, I think career centers, they don't have like YouTubing or
Yes.
content creation as an established career field. For those kids who are thinking about this, but they're so afraid. So what advice do you have
Mm.
for those people?
It's interesting. First, it needs to be it always goes back to the why, right? This is the whole thing with
Mhm.
intentional living is that you want to be intentional with why you want to do this, right? So before you even start creating content, you want to ask yourself why you want to do it. Is it because you want to become popular? Is it because you want to be a thought leader? Is it because it'll actually create a bridge into a next step in your career? Is it for self-discovery, right? Or is it to get to know people and create a community? These are all valid reasons. And it doesn't really matter your reason so much as you have to be aware of your reason, right?
Mhm.
And this is actually the first step of separating yourself from what society is telling you. Because if you go into content creation because you feel like, oh, this is like the cool thing that everybody's doing, then you might and that's just going into another red ocean scenario.
Mhm.
That's just as bad or even actually worse than going into like, a job that you're not really like, liking or something because you don't even get paid as
Mhm.
much, right? So the first step is actually really understanding concretely, why you want to do it. The second thing is to keep in mind that even if you don't really have experience in something, you might actually be a better teacher than a master because the
Mhm.
master has forgotten how to become a student,
Mhm.
right? So when I'm creating YouTube videos, yes, I've been mind mapping for the last 13 years, right? But I actually really have to like think very difficult, like very hard about how I teach because I've kind of forgotten how to be a student. And now with my Map Nation, with my community, I'm finally getting this feedback loop because people are asking me, oh, how do you actually break this down? I was like, oh, that's a great question, right? So if you're just starting out without any experience, then share your journey.
Mhm.
Like I always say that, in the past, in my 13 years in the tech industry, I was always becoming something,
Mhm.
right? When I say that, it's like, whenever I like jump from one job to the next, whenever I went from let's say a business strategist to a product manager, these are completely different roles. I
Mhm.
was in the process of becoming a product manager. I
Mhm.
wasn't that yet. That means I had to sprint up a learning curve. I had
Mhm.
to talk to the right people. I had to like put myself in the product manager's shoes as a sink or swim, right? That process is very valuable because if you're interested in doing this and you're going through and you're living it, you can bet that there is a huge number there's probably a good number of people. You're not alone, basically, right? And that's the power of the internet,
Mhm.
which is the long tail. It's like there's a this is the power of Amazon. This is the power of YouTube and all this. The power of the internet is its ability to aggregate the long tail, right?
Mhm.
In the past, it was very, very difficult to find people who are actually interested in what you have to share.
That's
But
right.
through YouTube, through the algorithms, right? The little, the small number of people from around the world who are interested in your topic can actually add up to a very, very big number over
Mhm.
time. So the market is out there, the audience is out there. This brings me to my final point, which is consistency.
Mhm.
right? It's not enough to actually just share a one-off, oh, this is day one, right? You actually have to share day one, day two, day three, year one retrospective, all this stuff, because it takes a lot of time. And this is the hardest part about the creator journey, is because when you first start, it's just crickets. Nobody knows you. You're super obscure. You're not known for anything, right? So I would say you better love the journey.
That's right. That's
You
right.
better love the journey, and then to share that journey. That's the key to success.
I love that. I really wish, when I look back at my own journey, like since I quit my job, I wish I documented more of my own journey so that people know there's
Me
really
too.
nothing like overnight success. Yeah. So here's a great question from Dan. He's asking regarding what you said earlier, Berkeley. And so he suspected that most of the big tech Ivy schools are that way and trying to divest that image. So what do you recommend for young people looking at entering college? So do you recommend kind of the liberal arts route, or maybe don't even go to school and get more experience, or kind of the traditional?
I think that going to school is still really important, right? Because again, when I went to Berkeley, I didn't necessarily focus on the grades so much, because just the school is an ecosystem, right? Even though the schools might focus on funneling you to a particular role, there is also your peers. It's like, why do people, why do startups go for Y Combinator? Why do creators like us, apply for LinkedIn Accelerator, right? Why do people go to MBA? It's not necessarily for the class. It's actually for the people. So, what Berkeley or a good college does is that it actually, focuses, or it concentrates and draws like really cool people, really talented people who are really driven in one place, right? And that's the power of cities too. It's almost like, what after your graduation, that's the other question you should ask yourself. What city should you actually live in? Because that's going to really determine who you're going to meet and what kind of ideas you're going to learn, because learning is a lifelong thing. It's not going to stop once you graduate college. So I think, if you're in high school going for college, think about both the city, not just the college itself, right? Where is it close to, right? Who are you going to actually get to know as well? That's a really key thing. So, and I would say, when you're in college, go explore all the extracurricular things, not just the classes, because in the future, what you're going to learn, there's a half-life. The half-life of the skills is going to be obsolete faster and faster, right? It's the mindsets, it's the people, it's the processes that you pick up that's going to have a much longer longevity in your future, I would say.
Yeah. I love that. I think even a while ago, I interviewed someone in computer science. They were even mentioning that by the time you graduate, the things you learn from school may no longer be relevant. So I definitely agree. And lifelong learning, yes. So to wrap things up, and any advice that you have been on this content creation for a few years.
Yeah.
So any advice that you have for fellow content creators who are just kind of figuring out their way on this journey to keep them going and just be consistent and just don't give up?
Yeah. I would say, focus on your journey, right? It's very easy to actually go onto the platforms. Like these days, I spend more time than ever on LinkedIn, for example, right? And it's very easy to actually get discouraged because everybody on in our accelerator is so freaking legit. And I connected to all of you. So all my news feed is just full of everybody's posts. I'm like, wow, this person got 60 likes and how many comments or whatever it is, right? And I'm like, I'm looking at my 4. I'm like, oh no. So this is you gotta focus on your own journey. That's the thing, right? Everybody is different in that way. So I would say, almost put your blinders on of sorts, right? Of course, you want to learn from other people. I literally in my Kanban board, I have this tab that goes inspirations. So whenever I see a post actually, that I really like, I actually take a screen grab and then I'll actually paste it in there because I'll actually learn from it. So I would say your mindset is super, super important. So, you want to find someone that's really passionate, that's going to actually you're not going to just give up after a couple posts or, that feedback loop and stuff, because it takes a lot of time. So that social comparison, that FOMO is real, but the mental game is probably the biggest element in this content creation career.
I love that. I love that. Definitely. Definitely. And I feel you. That's when I look at my own LinkedIn, I'm like, oh my God, everyone is just like, so I definitely hear, I think just working on that mindset piece and remember, I think someone said, don't compare our chapter 1 with someone's chapter 25, right? So
Yes.
I think, understanding that everyone has their own journey, I think that's such a great point.
Yeah, I mean, and also just like, last thing is focus on your mission, focus on your why, right? Like I always
Mhm.
try to remember, why I started this creative, journey in the first place. It's to help people. It's to help people organize their lives, to tame chaos and live more intentionally. So if that's the North Star, then everything else doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter if I reach like one person, 10 people, or a million people. As
Mhm.
long as you're helping people, that's what should matter, and then
Mhm.
everything else will follow.
I love that. I love that. I'm just watching your own like your YouTube videos have already like
Mhm.
benefited my life a lot. I'm definitely going to share, especially
I'm
that
happy.
emotional one, like understand your own emotion. I'm definitely going to share that with many of my students. It is so powerful because when I think about mind mapping, I'm mainly for like projects for work. I never thought
Mhm.
about applying that to our personal life. So that is
Absolutely.
an eye opener for me. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, these are all the tools that's really, stress tested, tried and true in my own life.
Yeah.
Again, it's a matter
Yeah.
of just sharing what has worked for you with others.
Yeah, awesome. I
Mhm.
love it, Sean. Thank you so much for your time. And so, share with us how can people learn more about you? I have been having your LinkedIn and also showing your
Yes.
YouTube and any other place that you are also super active on.
On Instagram, occasionally I share, my personal stuff, but really it's YouTube. YouTube, check that out. I would love to hear from you. I also have a newsletter called Epiphany on my website, mymapnation.com. So every week I basically share a mind map, some productivity lessons as well as nuggets from the community. So definitely check that out.
Wow. I respect you even more. You even have a newsletter and YouTube video. Wow, that's amazing.
I'm gonna go ahead and after this call, I'm gonna go and publish that.
Yeah, that's awesome. I would definitely join. I just subscribe to a YouTube channel. I look forward to the next. So how often do you publish your video on YouTube?
Yeah, so I do about once every 1 or 2 weeks or so. That's the cadence I mean, ever since this LinkedIn Accelerator started, it's just like, oh my gosh, it's taking a dip, right? Before it was like every week, and now it's like every other week, and sometimes it's like, is it once every 3 weeks? We're gonna get back in the ball.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. I love it. I love it. And so, yeah, keep doing your own thing or to ignore the. Yes, I totally agree. Yeah. And thank you so much again, Sean, for such a really
Thank
fun,
you so
informative.
much.
I learned so much. I had so much fun. And everyone, please definitely make sure to subscribe to the newsletter, which I didn't even know. Otherwise, I would have included here.
Thank you.
And so here's the LinkedIn, and I will share the YouTube again. And amazing. I have been binge watching many of his YouTube videos. I absolutely love it and really benefiting my personal life. So thank you so much and for joining us live.
Thank
Thank you
you.
so much for watching the replay. And thank you so much, Sean. It's such a great pleasure and honor to interview you.
It's really my privilege. Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Yeah. Bye, everyone.